And it was absolutely a lot of fun. And yet, even though we were riding motorcycles through the middle of this town, everything about the process still felt like D&D. So I thought you really nailed it. I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
I'm Nerdarchy Steve. Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds. Alright, so today we're talking Dungeons, Dragons, and motorcycle gangs. Oh my, what is the inspiration for this video, Ted?
Alright, so I kind of put this one on the table, even though the real direction kind of comes from you. We recently started a new campaign. We're calling it, Under the Dome. Dave is the DM. It's a post-apocalyptic version of the world that we've kind of been playing in for a number of years. And the concept was like, can you mash a post-apocalyptic motorcycle gang with a D&D rule set? Let's see if we can kind of make this happen, Mad Max style. So we're using, from the rules of Avernus, the Devil's Ride, but we've kind of, as opposed to using souls and soul coins to fuel them, we've kind of created our own kind of resource management to, exist in our game and not have it be so evil.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not even sure where I came up with the inspiration. I just know, when I pitch different games to our primary groups, which we do play some other role-playing games, but those groups tend to be more D&D centric in what we play. So we tend to stick with D&D for those groups. And so I'm always trying to be like, okay, what are 3 or 4 ideas that are, one will be like a more traditional D&D campaign. And then the other 2 or 3 will be something vastly different than what we would normally play. And, I was like, well, can we do post-apocalyptic with 5e? I mean, I had read Avernus like you, and I was like, I would really like to do something with motorcycles. And I'm like, I wouldn't want to do that in a straight up fantasy game. It just doesn't feel right to me. Mm-hmm. So how do we make that work? And then at some point, I was kind of inspired by the world of Revlo and Brian Colin and the creature creations, because all of his creatures are weird and very different. Even the playable character races, it's not like, they're so far removed from dwarves and elves and halflings. It's not even funny. And I really admired that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't know why, but one day I was looking at our pet chinchillas. I was like, you guys would make pretty cool D&D characters, especially if we added some scales and maybe some funky colors and a big rat tail or something. Sure. And you guys are kind of you guys would be great mobsters, because chinchillas are jerks. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. They hide behind all their floof and adorableness.
All right, so, be on the lookout for that video as well. But today we're going to talk about motorcycles. We had talked about D&D vehicles, and there's quite a lot of them over the many adventures of 5e, and that's not even talking about things that might have existed within other, campaign settings from previous editions. So let's get into the motorcycles. We did a session 1 recently. How did that go?
So with us, we doing session 1, and from session 0, I didn't know what you guys were going to focus on in the game, but session 0 really seemed like, I kind of threw out there, there's some racing that goes on, and some of the players were really interested whether or not there was street racing, was it legal, wasn't illegal, and so the focus seemed to kind of shift towards that, and one of the goals for the players was we want to be involved in this big race. And I was like, oh, okay, that's something we could work towards. But, generally it's that's something for the wealthy. They sponsor racers. So you're not going to be able to just start there. So I was like, all right, so since this seems important to my players, we're going to go with session 1 we're going to do a race with that. And matter of fact, we're even turning that into Patreon rewards and stuff where we're going to put that out there for people to see how I did it and made this kind of elaborate skill challenge in order to, make it kind of fun and interesting for my players. And it took up a decent chunk of the session. And it didn't feel like it was just rolling dice. There was role playing and stuff going on as well.
I had a lot of fun with it. There were interaction between riders, for good or for bad. There was a number of great things within the race, and it wasn't just, here's 3 skills. We have to get X number of successes. and then it's over. Like, you kind of broke it down into pieces of the race, and it was absolutely a lot of fun. And yet, even though we were riding motorcycles through the middle of this town, everything about the process still felt like D&D. So I thought you really nailed it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun too, and because like we didn't know if we were going to use the motorcycle gang concepts like going in like we did with races, or also the idea is you guys are scavengers in this post-apocalyptic world where you have to go out into the waste and get things, and you're going to ride your motorcycles to do it. And you might encounter other motorcycle gangs, and that's probably like what we're going to pick up on the next session. But instead, we focused in on you guys having to compete with these other racing teams, and some of them were real beasts.
That's a fantastic transition, so I think we should kind of get into the sponsor for this video, Bergen's Book of Beasts.
Yeah, Penny Dragon, the folks that made Mago Holding, are back at it again with the Book of Beasts by Bergens. And right now, you can sign up to get on the email list in order to be notified. What you're going to get is, I believe, is 200 plus beasts. There is going to be subclasses, magic items, and all of it is revolving around beasts. We're looking at 12 new beastly subclasses. I wonder what that's about. 20 new beastly magic items. But not only that, if you're one of the ones to back at a physical level early in the campaign, first 48 hours, you're going to get a free print copy of the Firestar Falling Adventure.
Now, if you're looking for new ranger companions, new wild shape options for your druid, or new familiars that you can be able to summon, this is a great option to kind of get into and add this supplement to your game.
There will be a link down in the description to go check that out and join the list and see what it's all about.
All right, so we kind of mentioned, in the beginning about taking the vehicles, specifically the Devil's Ride from the Avernus book, but obviously it has to be adapted for use. Was there any other adaptations beyond changing the souls and soul coins to something else?
Yeah, so one of the things we did is the Devil Rides are immune to fire because they're from hell. So I was like, all right, well, we're going to get rid of that. We're going to change, how it works in the game as far as what's fueling them. And honestly, at first I thought I was going to make them slower, but I was like, you know what? I'm not. But here's the thing. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, because if you wreck on a Devil's Ride going at full speed, you take a lot of damage. It's basically like falling damage, right? Mm-hmm. If you hit something and you collide. So it can actually be very dangerous. You guys are third level. You're not first level. So it might not kill you outright, but
it could.
But it could. And so that's something you guys are gonna have to take into consideration. If you want to use all the speed and mobility that these vehicles can offer, you're also going to have to take on the risk. And then then again, I'm like, well, we can also use other motorcycle gangs, and how's it going to affect spellcasters and stuff? Grease seems like a much more powerful spell now.
Yeah, I mean, that could cause all kinds of issues if you just you throw it out there in front of somebody's ride and they spin out. Ride could get destroyed, they could get killed, a combination thereof, or both.
And well, that's the other thing. Getting the Devil Ride itself is really expensive. We just basically say, $5,000. And if you wreck one, maybe can salvage some of it and bring down the cost a little bit, but it's going to be expensive to get a new one.
And, then you can kind of get into just like with anything else, is there a parts market? Is there a black market? What kind of angle can you look at? There are options for modifications, could you tweak it and make it go faster? Could you do all these other things? I mean, it's in every way, shape, or form a vehicle with components, so why not be able to have all of these extras?
Well, in the vehicles rules section of Descent into Avernus, there is upgrades, right, that you can add. And one of the rewards for winning the race was getting to upgrade your ride, for free, which is a pretty big deal. But I'm not using any of the upgrades from the book right now. I might use some, but instead I made ones that are more specific to the riders, right? They do stuff. So if they're a spellcaster, I was like, well, if you cast a spell on yourself, you can also have it extend to your ride as well. So, if you're curing yourself, you could, repair the ride at the same time.
Or, like I'm playing a sorcerer, so I'm like, so wait a second. If I get this, I could cast Dragon's Breath on myself. And then when I do that, I launch 2 gouts of, flame or acid or whatever have you at the same time. That's pretty exciting for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly how we'll work that out, but we'll definitely figure it out. And I'm pretty much good with doing whatever when it comes to making fun and cool things happen at the table. But even things like Long Strider, where it makes you faster, you can cast it on yourself, and then it's on the bike as well. It lasts a while; it's going to get a little faster, as if they needed to be any faster than they are. I think like the Rogue, theirs was like their ride gives the rider expertise when they're riding it for their checks, so they're even better at it. Which also helps because I don't think their prime stats are ones that are good for operating the Devil's Ride. That was the other thing. Like, so it's a vehicle's land check. I gave everyone in the party just proficiency with it. They're 3rd level. You can technically buy those proficiencies if you have the golden time anyway. So if it was going to be important to the campaign, I figured it'd be important to the players. So instead of like making them, pick things in order to get out, I was just like, you can all just start with that. And then I was like, it is a general rule of thumb, it will always be a dex or intelligence check. Player's choice. There might be something weird where it's like a strength check for some reason. Who knows?
And I know as you're kind of questioning as he says this, we have a strength-based rogue in the party, so that's why the expertise is helpful, because the rogue is not dex-based.
Yeah. So now, had they been higher level, like maybe uncanny dodge or evasion that extended to the ride would have been a possibility as well, which may happen. Like, and I'll probably do a lot of things. The barbarians can extend their rage to their rides, so they'll gain resistance against attacks coming in, which is I think is going to be important in the long run. Also, like having damage happen to your ride increases your chance for mishaps. Like that's the beauty of it. Like there is not a lot of rules you have to really come up with, because Descent into Avernus, that section covers a lot of it, and mishaps being one of them.
So it's really dangerous. It's got a high armor class, but anything that's kind of going to be AoE could really just seriously mess up your ride. So it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be problematic. So I'm really looking forward to the next session of this particular game, because so far it's been an absolute blast.
So I guess the question now is, and we kind of like brought this up a little bit earlier, is like, what kind of campaign works to have a motorcycle gang in it, a fantasy motorcycle gang?
There are a number of technological things that exist within D&D, whether you're talking about Modrons, whether you're talking about, the things in Avernus. So, and of course, the creme de la creme, Artificers, Warforged, like there's all these things that already are speaking in that kind of high fantasy Eberron-esque direction, that it's like, well, could you not extrapolate and take that into another direction and just be like, all right, well, we're going to take that, as opposed to Lightning Rail where it's sourced, like we're going to build that device and have motorcycles or like small vehicles of some extent within a fantasy world. And that's just, where it's moving.
Yeah. And, so with D&D, we've had post-apocalyptic and very, very high magic, Eberron being very, very high magic with lots of different vehicles. And then, Dark Sun was one of the OG campaign settings that was very post-apocalyptic in a different way. And they even had like sailing ships that would sail on the Salt Sea. And you needed a scion to operate a special helm to even make that happen.
Yeah, they would sit there and they would make contact with this, orb or device to keep the vessel, the boat, actually above the silt. Because if anything disturbed that connection, the ship would just start sinking into the sand, the silt, as they call it, the sea. But it was still absolutely not water.
So there's some precedent for it. And also, like, the vehicles have stats, right? They have a stat block, including ability scores, right? So I also, like, part of it is, like, in re-envisioning the Devil's Rides for our own campaigns and our own games, and he giving them less infernal bent to them, Nerder Doug has suggested making them a Vargarian device, which would definitely work. But I'm kind of thinking, been mulling that over about like, what if we made it a Vargarian creature, right? Like, because they're already kind of a stat block. You know, what if sentience is put into these things, and they're kind of like constructs, but they get used as vehicles and kind of like mounts instead. That got me thinking, like, what about a Wild Wild West game where you take the Devil's Rides and you just change them a little? They change how they look, but you can use the stats and turn them into mechanical horses or construct horses, and then like you can do your cowboys and Indians style game.
What was the was it just Wild West, the Will Smith movie that had
Wild West? There was like an extra wild or something.
Yeah,
I think.
so like, while it was not a fantastic movie, like those kind of elements could be incorporated within this style of game for sure.
Yeah, so there's different ways to use it. I don't think it works in most standard D&D games, but honestly, we've been playing this game a long time, and I kind of get bored with standard D&D games now. As a GM, I want to challenge like what I can come up with.
Sure. I mean, I absolutely agree. There's to me, when I'm watching something that's not traditional fantasy, I'm always looking for, what kind of elements can I take and how can I add that to my game in some way, shape, or form, whether it's D&D or not. But like there are times that I'm like, all right, well, how can I do this? 5e is not the best rule set for everything, but it can be taken in a lot of different directions. And I absolutely feel that when you're coming up with campaign ideas, things that kind of stretch your imagination and stretch your creativity are absolutely directions I think you should be looking in.
Yeah, and also I feel like Eberron kind of opens the doorway for a game like the one I'm running, because it's like the using magic in a way that Eberron does, or even extrapolating, even like League of Legends, right? They do use a lot of Magitech stuff. If anyone's watched the Arcane show on Netflix, is really good, is a good example of that, where it's like, it's really technology, but it's just powered by magic, kind of. And that's what I'm going with this game. So, and I think it's just another direction, and we'll see where Session 2 takes us, right? Section 2, well, instead of being racers, you guys are going to be going out into the wilds and scavenge on your Devil's Rides, and we'll see what happens there.
Absolutely, I'm like I said, I'm really looking forward to it. I had an absolute blast with this first game. Players, the characters are all meshing really well. We got some nice backstory to tie us all together. So this is going to be a good one. Let
us know what you think down in the comments. You think it's a great idea? You think it sucks? Share your ideas and thoughts with the rest of the Nerdarchy community. Maybe you've even done it before, but we got a place where we can talk about it down in the comments.
While you're down there, don't forget to do all those fun things like share, subscribe. Go ahead and click that notification bell. You know the drill.
Quick reminder, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we drop new videos here on the channel, so come on back. But you can't wait till then. No worries, we got you covered. There's a card up here where you can check out Dungeons, Dragons, and Mechs in your D&D game.
So until next time, stay nerdy.